This is your Chargers linebacker, Daiyan Henley, and you're tuning in with Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Daiyan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. If this is your first time tuning in the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Daiyan Wolkenstein, the first day of the legal tampering period of free agency is officially in the books. And it was a busy one. But if you were a Chargers fan, you were probably hoping that you were asleep for this first day, maybe on vacation, maybe put into a coma, because it's been a rough day for the Chargers fan base. And that is why Dan and I are here today, because if there was ever a day for positive Dan Wolkenstein to be back, I'm not so sure that it was received as well as it should have been. But positive Dan Wolkenstein was out there today on social media trying to keep the Chargers fan base from crashing into oblivion.
Didn't work.
I said to Dan before the show that I would be bringing on a special guest of my own. and this is not for me. This is for the Charger fans everywhere that I know probably need one of these as well. I'm with you. Salud. Dan, it's been a weird day. It's been a weird day that maybe right now things don't entirely make sense. And again, the next coming days of free agency and maybe the next week, the picture is going to look a little bit clearer to all of us. And obviously the draft is going to solve some, answer some questions at that point in time. But Dan, initial takes, day one, free agency, Chargers.
Initial takes. We definitely have some voicemails with some reactions that we're going to get to today. So Chargers Unleashed hotline is well underway. We'll have some of those as we sprinkle in. You have us here for about an hour. And I would say the last maybe 8 hours or so have been a bit in our feelings. I think what started off strong going into the day.
Started off nicely.
I should say going into yesterday. And then DK gets a bag of money. Donte goes elsewhere. And then chips continue to fall with interior offensive linemen starting to go. You start to see some of the tier 2, tier 3 receivers start to go. And then you see Poona Ford go. And Chargers sitting on all this money. Aside from the fact that they brought back the return of the back in Khalil Mack. And money seems to be burning holes in pockets around Chargers fandom. And I get it. But I don't think anybody should be surprised, including ourselves. Because, Jake, you and I both said this on the last show we had, that we're going to finish up day one.
I said you weren't going to like my answer.
And we're going to maybe have a couple signings, nothing big. And we're going to wait for that wave 2 and watch Chargers fans crash. And sure enough, here we are. So Nostradamus ourselves predicted it. And even us, we're still a little frustrated at times today. Jake and I had many conversations of like, are you kidding me? And reeling things back. But I'm not even trying to just peddle optimism. Like, that's not what I'm doing. I'm more just, they've told us who they are. They've told us what they do. They told us what they care about so many times. Yet this Chargers fandom, myself included at times, doesn't want to believe them, doesn't want to listen. But that same group won 11 games last year. I think you got to give them time to cook. And so is day one a masterpiece? I don't know. But free agency is so far from over. And they have a ton of money to spend. And there's a lot of good guys out there still.
Dan, I think it's simply because you look back at the last regime in terms of whether it was Phillip Rivers or Justin Herbert when he came along. it felt like it took like tooth and nail just to get those respective quarterbacks weapons. And I think that's part of the built up frustration. And I get it. I feel it. And at the same time, especially after watching a majority of last year, I think I said something similar to this, Dan, prior to the draft. And this was obviously after the Keenan Allen trade and Mike Williams being released. At that point in time, I said, well, the Chargers got to get some wide receivers because as of now, the only receivers that they had on their roster at that point in time before Ladd McConkey was Hinkle McCrinkleberry and X-Wing at Aliciousness.
Jamarius Theratrax.
And sitting here today, outside of Ladd McConkey, your only wide receivers are Hinkle McCrinkleberry and X-Wing at Aliciousness. So I get it. I totally understand the motivation that everybody has for Justin Herbert to get weapons to make the offense better as a whole. And especially after yesterday, when you hear the Davante Adams news and when you hear the trade for DK and the huge contract that he got signed for, I know that was rough for everybody to experience. But at the same time, you're just kind of trying to figure out, like, well, what in the blue hell are they doing here? And as Dan said, they've told us who they are so many times. When Jim Harbaugh walked to the podium over 1 year ago, he told us in so many ways what he was investing in, what he was going to rebuild. And that ultimately led to the selection of Joe Alt and
all piss.
J.K. Dobbins being signed and his emphasis on the run game and Greg Roman coming in as the offensive coach. And those signings went into his vision. And as Dan said, that team went 11-6. But then you start looking around the AFC West specifically, and you look at what the Denver Broncos have done in the last 24 hours, even to a certain extent over the weekend. The Raiders have had themselves a nice start to free agency. Kansas City Chiefs have shored up a couple spots as well. You just have to believe that there's something going on behind the curtain. As we said, this is the most cap space that the Chargers have had since Tom Telesco had it, and he spent it on a number of free agents that in the big picture of things did not give back a good return in value. So what is Joe Ortiz doing? That's the big question.
Action Dan 65. No, that's not me. Thank you, Action Dan, whoever you are. $20 donation with the super chat. Everyone chill. Most teams will be done adding to their teams today and through the draft. Ortiz looks to add pieces throughout the year.
That is true. He did that last year.
As Jake sips his brown stuff. Let's get to some of these super chats real quick.
I got to tell you, I'm already in a better mood.
Good. Burning good. Hugh Nguyen, $2 donation. Talk me off the ledge. His Cup our best option now.
Just go down the wide receivers list. That's the best whatever one is left on that list is essentially the Chargers' best wide receiver option.
You got Cooper Kupp possibly. You've got Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs. You still got possible trade options with T. Higgins and such. Yeah, I mean, you got Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. But yeah, probably he's up there. Heading into the draft. Yes, real quick on this note, DK, 5 years, $30 million per. I understand Chargers had a ton of coin.
Yep.
There's no way they were doing that. And in my opinion, nor should they. I love the player. But $30 million for 5 years is a lot of coin for someone who, he's great, don't get me wrong, but he is not top 5 wide receiver territory.
Look, I think this is a simple case of DK wanted his money. Remember, he was the one that was given permission to seek a trade with his representation. It wasn't the other way around from the organization. Mm-hmm. And when we started hearing all of that smoke that was connecting the Chargers to DK Metcalf and why it made sense that he wanted to be out west, be with a contender, be in sunny LA. In the midst of that day, there was a tweet that came out saying, well, there might be a sliding reaction here that if other teams are prepared to pony up, DK's willing to go somewhere where it ain't so sunny, and it's not the West Coast, and it's not playing with Justin Herbert.
Sound
And I guarantee you that while DK was probably out finding the best deal for himself, Seattle was making sure that they got theirs as well. So do I believe that the Chargers were in the talks for DK Metcalf? Yes, I do. But also, DK was in that one for himself because that was a much bigger deal than a lot of people projected that he was going to get, whatever team that he ended up siding with.
5 years, $30 million is not a responsible signing. Like aggressive, there's a lot of, I'm not saying it's bad signing. There's a lot of terms you can use to categorize that, but responsible is not one of them. So I don't think anybody should be that surprised. There was someone in the chat here saying that the Davante Adams one hurt a little bit more. I kind of agree. Because that was kind of the price tag that I was thinking, yeah, I could see that's like the sweet spot to go get their wide receiver one. Bravo Foxtrot Whiskey says, sounded like a David Boston contract. Do you remember those days?
Oh, nobody wants to relive those days. I know everybody's in their feelings right now, but nobody wants to go back and live those days.
No, we do not. Athir with a $5 donation. Thank you so much, Athir. I want to start with this. I loved DK, but I am not throwing 150 mil away for a wide receiver been in the NFL 7 years. Get out of here. My GM did the right thing. I tend to agree with him, Jake. Before we go any further, we'll get some of these voicemails real fast. But before we get to it, let's pay the bills. Let's talk about our friends.
I want to remind everybody that BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads during the games to bet on. You think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every single week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of up to $200K. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino and get on a game of blackjack or poker or on one with one of our 150 slot games. Head on over to the website today to get in on the action. BetOnline. The game starts here. Dan, I treat every ad read, by the way, like a 40-yard dash where I try to better it every single time and just make it that much faster. I think I actually went a little bit slower on that one because I had, I should have been called for a false start.
I don't know. It sounded pretty good to me. You didn't bust your ankle like the NFL draft prospect.
Gunnar Helm.
There we go. You didn't do that. We'll get to voicemail here, but Chargers, again, they go get Khalil Mack and Tyre Tart back. They bring in Donte Jackson, and they re-sign J.K. Scott. A lot of question marks about who's coming up, which we'll get into for a bit. But let's get to some of these voicemails real fast so we can kind of get through as many of these as possible. Jake, Chargers Unleashed hotline was blowing up a little bit today and yesterday. Let me see if I can find all of these. First one. Let's hear what that to say.
Howdy, Jake, Dan, fellow Chargers fans. Man, things are happening. Well, the fan base is on fire and that sucks. Free agency. Not a lot of things are happening right now. That kind of sucks. At the same time, I think the fan base is overreacting. It sucks that the things that we wanted, we didn't get. But then to say because we didn't get them, things aren't happening makes no sense. Yeah, to me, at least. But we just gotta keep it pushing because it's not it's not in one day, it's multiple days. So we just gotta wait and see what happens. That's it. Both up.
Things didn't happen our way, and it sucks.
Keep it moving. We keep it moving.
That's the message to take away. I get it. It's day one. I understand. This is why a lot of people are in their feelings right now. And for many reasons, I totally get it. But it is only day one. It is only day one.
It is only day one. Next voicemail.
Dan and Jake, I have no unearthly idea what we're doing.
That's better. That's better.
I understand depth. I understand getting your bang for your buck, making wise decisions, but we're not plugging holes. In fact, our holes are just staying holes. They might even be getting bigger. Puna's gone. It looks like we might have to pick up Keenan, which sounds sad at this point because it's like we're taking him as a backup option. I have no clue what the hell we're doing. Can you guys possibly shed some light on like available options that'll actually mean something. Thanks, guys. Enjoy your stuff.
Thank you. I'll let you take this one, Jake.
I mean, yeah, that one was much more directly to the point. I don't have any kind of idea of what is going on. But as far as his message in terms of plugging up holes, that was I think that's kind of been the big question all day with everybody in terms of the free agency moves, because a lot of people expected the Chargers to build out that interior of the offensive line that obviously was a huge flaw for them last year. And you bring back Bradley Bozeman on a multi-year deal. We haven't seen the contract details of that just yet. We don't know at this point, especially for the fact that it hasn't happened yet, that Trey Pipkins is either going to stay or go. We heard Joe Ortiz talk about at the Combine that Zion Johnson was being tried out at center. Didn't necessarily mean that was going to be a permanent move, but that was some of the things that were talked about. So it sounded like from that standpoint that this team still wanted to give Zion Johnson an opportunity. But at the end of the day, the product was the product last year. And for many a time during the NFL season, the interior of that offensive line was an issue. Things masked it at times, and it looked all right at times. But a majority of the time, when it came to overall pass protection or run blocking, it could have been a lot better. So then you see certain moves, like one that really gut punched me. And I was even having a conversation with Steve Hagelin from Guilty as Charged about this, because we were firing back hypotheticals that if Andre James and Patrick McCarry were signed by the Chargers, that, that would feed some families and that would be a huge boost to the offensive line. And then about 42 minutes later, Patrick McCarry got picked up by Jacksonville on a very nice contract for himself. And that dream, was gone. So, but to the big picture, and this kind of leads into the next topic that a lot of people, and even including myself, on a little bit puzzling, that the Chargers are interested in Najee Harris, and they are reportedly wanting to close a deal with him. Does this mean that the Chargers are not bringing back J.K. Dobbins? Doesn't necessarily mean that, but I think it does affect it. And if it was me, I would have liked a running back stable better with bringing J.K. back, number one, because he deserved that contract. Number two, I think he's much more explosive than what Najee Harris is at this point of his career, and kind of has always been as it relates to his running style. And then you go out and you get a running back in one of the deepest classes that's been there for the last 20 years. So I'm not entirely sure what it is they're talking about here or what they're trying to do. Remember, when we had Brett Coleman on the show, Dan, what did he say? Offensive line or the floor, your positional or your skill positions are the ceiling. You got to build the floor first. Right now, the Chargers have the floor, but there's no sealant underneath it. So it pretty much makes the floor worthless. They still have to build the floor and build it properly.
They have parts of the floor.
Sure. But you got some building to do.
Well, the good news is, so a lot to unpack on that one. The good news is this is the draft to do that in. First off, interior offensive line, there's a ton in this draft. They can get starters, according to multiple people. You can get starters in day 1, 2, and even day 3 to help build that floor. And for substantially less money than what you saw the going rate today, anyways. Now, Najee Harris, I said weeks ago that I could see him fitting with this scheme, with a mentality, with a physicality. I understand that the maybe efficiency hasn't been there, but I'm not necessarily sure if that's what this Chargers team has really been lacking. Like, it's a bonus for sure. One, do I think Najee Harris will be? My personal opinion is that I think him and J.K. Dobbins would be a great tandem, and go get a running back out of the draft. 100%. Chargers have had a hard time getting that 1 yard, the 2 yards, the 3 yards for years. That's what Gus Edwards was supposed to be doing. Never panned out, except for like 2 games. Najee Harris is a good running back. He's a former first-round pick for a reason. And you talk about adding value. getting surplus value out of something. Chargers haven't had a stalwart running back since who? Everyone talks about needing to improve this running game. Got to invest in it. Offensive line, 100%. Has to improve. This does not mean that does not improve. It's a full picture here. But I like NAJEE Harris. I like what it signals to this Chargers fan base and to the team. Like, they are going to be physical. They are going to fix the run game one way or another. And that's how they're going to spend some of their money. Now, do Chargers fans love the eye candy of DK Metcalf and Devontae Adams and, pick a fast, strong guy? Sure. This Chargers team, to Brett Coleman's point in a previous episode, won 11 games, and they didn't give two shits about who was catching passes. They did it in spite of that. Now, imagine if they had that exact same receiving core and an offensive line and a running back like this. Be a different story. I understand NAJEE Harris isn't the guy that a lot of people wanted, and if everyone says it's a stupid move, I choose to not question Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh right now, because year one, they got to 11 wins and took that roster that wasn't that great to pretty darn good heights because of the coaching staff. Now, I think today's news with the Bradley Bozeman re-signing got a lot of people in their feelings. You heard rumors about a Jameis Winston being brought in, which I would think in my head, Jake, I was like, oh my gosh, if Jameis Winston gets signed next, this Chargers fan base is going to go absolutely ballistic. What do you make of the Bradley Bozeman signing? Do you think he's a starter? Do you think he's a veteran mentor? What do you see it as?
Again, it's that multi-year deal language, Dan, that gets me. I don't know what that's about. And that's what's got me curious. And until I actually see numbers, I can maybe make a better determination on that. Because the Chargers need a center. I'm sorry, but you need a long-term solution for Justin Herbert. And last year, it wasn't just your center, but it was your two interior offensive linemen that just did not get the job done. And you need to start investing that more in the draft the way you did with Joe Alt last year. I would be 100% on board if the selection at 22 was Gray Zabel. If you were to tell me that Bradley Bozeman is coming on a multi-year deal in terms of a depth piece, and the Chargers go out and they select Zabel at 22, okay, you've got my attention back a little bit. I am now getting a fuller picture of what it is that you're doing. But it's hard, especially now, to say that when whatever the board is going to look like and whatever the holes that the Chargers need to fill between now and April 24th, what is it ultimately going to look like by the time we hit day one of the draft? It's going to be interesting. But the Chargers need to rebuild the interior of this offensive line, make it better for Justin Herbert, make it better for their pass blocking, which is in turn going to assist their wide receivers. Definitely need to make it better in terms of their run blocking. So whatever the plan is for NAJEE Harris coming in, I still believe that this is going to be a running back by committee. Even if J.K. Dobbins came back, it was still going to be that in my head. Yeah. And I believe that that's still what Greg Roman is going to try to execute with his run game. But yeah, one of these running backs is going to get selected by the Chargers. Whether it's Omarion Hampton, whether it's RJ Harvey.
Jake's going to walk in there and make him pick himself.
Whether it's Hendrickson, Judkins, I don't care. Doesn't matter. But the Chargers need to select a running back in one of the best groups that we have seen in 20 years.
So Louser Bruin says $10 million a year isn't value. Come on, Dan. I don't know. I might counter that. For a team that runs a shit ton and they predicate their success on being a physical ground and pound team, what's more value? A 30K DK or a 10K running back? You tell me. DK is going to get what? 8 targets a game? Maybe? Alongside Ladd? NAJEE probably would get 15 to 20, 25 touches a game.
But remember, Dan, it's also the difference that those players make when they don't have the ball in their hand and when they're not getting the targets. Mm-hmm. It's the same damn thing as far as why A.J. Brown complimented Saquon Barkley so well, is that You can't afford to put 8 in the box against an Eagles team like that. You can't afford to do that. If it was DK Metcalf, hypothetically, and whoever XYZ running back it was going to be, that was going to help that. Plus, DK could block his ass off.
Yep.
That was going to help you in a multitude of different ways, even
True.
when that receiver isn't being targeted.
True. Loud Bruin comes the counterpoint. If that was the case, Puna was more valuable. That one stung. Not going to lie.
Yes. No argument there.
The Puna signing hurt because that was exactly what I thought the Puna value would be. And I thought the Chargers would value that and prioritize agreeing to it. And to see him go somewhere else, like, that was tough because it wasn't out of range, in my opinion. I agree. I got nothing for you on that one. Let's see. Alan says, we are not a ground and pound team, Dan. That's what we want to be. So how are you going to do it? How are you going to take on the identity of your head coach and your coaching staff and your GM if you're not going to go out and get guys that can do it? I'm sorry. Joker Hope says, who's going to catch the ball besides Ladd?
I already said
Josh Palmer.
Hinkle McCringleberry and X-Wing at Maliciousness.
Any other questions? Josh Palmer signs with the Bills. Was it $12 million per, I believe, for 3 years?
3 years, $12 million. Great deal for him. I mean, We heard the reports leading up to free agency that he was going to have a healthy market. I don't think that I expected it to be that healthy, but great for Josh Palmer. That's a great contract for him, and I wish him the best of luck in Buffalo.
Butters ID says, Danny Boy looking disappointed. You know, I almost said no, he's not right, but I guess kind of. But like, I'm kind of
Mr. Positive all day. What the hell?
I know, but it's not disappointed like they did the wrong thing. Like, Jake, you and I talked about this offline, that you and I predicted exactly this a week ago. And then fast forward, the exact same thing that we expected to happen goes through, and we're freaking out, and we're pissed off, and we're sad, and we're going through our emotions. Because I think that's still us not recognizing or aligning to the new philosophy of this team. And so while it might not be what we would have done or what this team would have done historically, what they're doing shouldn't be surprising. They've said it for weeks and months, but still, it doesn't help. It's hard to not get a little like, oh, damn it, when Devontae Adams gets signed, or when Puna leaves, or when you don't get DK. Because, look, we all want Justin to have his number one guy. Like, we all want that. We all want Justin to be protected, right? We all want this team to be great. And so when you see these other guys, these talented players go elsewhere, like, it's hard. But I think it was Chris Harry that said earlier today, like, free agency and roster construction is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So, like, day one is not yet in the books. We could still have some breaking news as we're on here. But I understand the angst because Chargers fans, you know, Jake, like, there's a lot of holes that had to get filled this year. A lot of money to spend still, but a lot of holes. And yeah, if they go 3 weeks from now going into the draft and they don't fill a ton of these holes, like, I'm going to be a little frustrated and a little pissed and a little scared. 100%. Like, I'm with you. But Jake, I think what Chargers fans sometimes forget, and I try to remind myself this when I get in those modes, is like, we've seen this team with top tier talent, quote unquote, top tier contracts, right? Look at the Joey Bosas, the Keenan Allens. You had Derwin James back in the day. There's a lot of them. And unfortunately, with Mike Williams, like, stuff happens. Corey Linsley. You got the Green Bay tackle, Balaga. Like, they've signed guys that have been top heavy on the roster from a salary cap perspective, and there's nobody underneath to support. I would rather have a deep B squad than a thin A squad and then C's and D's underneath. Like, you're not going to be sustainable as a team. So,
look, to Dan's point here, we have to remember that when Tom Telesco had the most money that he had as a GM, You brought in guys like Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson, J.C. Jackson. You signed a ton of players in the first 2 days of that free agency period. Was anybody, and I'm not saying this from the standpoint of the players themselves, but everybody knew that when the contract was up or players got traded, what impact did it really make to the team outside of a body being out there? Because the play did not return an investment. It just ate up a shit ton of cap room. Let's remember that just for a second. As opposed to last year, and the Chargers do, again, have had so many internal free agents, but look how many actually hit on one-year deals. Tyler Tart, Poona Ford, to a certain extent, Christian Fulton, J.K. Dobbins, Elijah Molden after a trade. And the Chargers had to do it that way because they were handcuffed because they had such a lack of cap room to work with. So it's because of a single offseason like that, and the Chargers ultimately end up finishing 11-6 on top of what they ended up doing in the draft, that still is not entirely swaying me of the strategy of Joe Ortiz or Jim Harbaugh. But at this point, given the moves that have been made, there is some part of me that is thinking there has to be something brewing here, right? Something behind the curtains. There has to be something going on.
I saw someone post this earlier, and I kind of agree with it, Jake. I forget who it was that said it. Maybe it was Hagelin. I forget who. But someone was talking about how, like, what was told to Khalil Mack when he probably had other offers, most likely, that got him to stay. Like, was it just the fact that he's here, that he likes the staff, he likes the ownership, he's in LA? Like, it can't be that. It can't just be, like, maybe it is, but, like, I doubt it. I gotta believe that there's something coming. And who knows? I don't know. We'll get to who is out there. Jake, let's get some of these comments because there's a lot of them here. Keenan Allen is coming home. The only decent thing. How would you feel about Keenan?
Again, I don't know. I was already in my mindset that, it's nostalgia is a great thing, and Keenan is still Keenan and will always be Keenan to any Chargers fan out there. But at this point in time, what are you going to do? Because Ladd now mans the slot. It's not going to be Keenan's role. So what, you're going to have Keenan as exclusively an outside wide receiver? That's never been his real game. That just, to me, wouldn't make much sense if the Chargers need an actual deep threat, a true X receiver. So as much as I love Keenan Allen, I don't know how much sense that would make, honestly.
I'd rather have Cooper Kupp than Keenan. They kind of played the similar role. I think Cooper Kupp can do more. GTL says, no way to spin this. Ortiz got worked over and his inexperience showed. This team cannot plug all the holes this year. It's 8 wins.
Might as well just put the 2025 season to bed.
Yep.
Start scouting players of 2026. Let's move on.
Park the Pinto. Let's just get ready for the next season. Funny how his inexperience worked against him this year, but his experience worked for him in the staff last season. Weird how that works. Let's get to another voicemail, Jake, real quick, because we got some of them. Got to get through a lot of them. Here we go. Next voicemail from Chargers Unleashed.
Yes, sir. How much help is Ben Herbert, the strength and conditioning coach, going to be now that he's been with the players for a year? Thank you.
Short and sweet.
Ben Herbert question, March 10th, 2025 at 5:52 Pacific. Love it. Love it. Now, some people may not think that the Ben Herbert experience was working last year, considering how many players were injured. But it's also coaching on top of that does the trick when you have your backups working for you. And that's where guys like Steve Klingscale and Jesse Minter come into play, because a lot of those injuries were on defense. And they had to weather a storm specifically in the secondary. So Ben Herbert, I think after the first year of adjusting to, okay, holy shit, this guy's coming in and changing the whole damn regime or, regimen. Yeah, everybody's going to be fine. Everybody's going to tailor to what Ben Herbert has to say. If you don't listen to Ben Herbert, be scared. He's just a terrifying individual.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's going to be great. And again, like so many of those players that got injured last year, not many of them were season ending. And so as much as there's a lot of injuries that happens, I think he's handling this team pretty well. Forgotten Locale says, I was assured we were bringing Mack back once we released Joey. I think all of us were cautiously optimistic and kind of secretly begging that to be the case. But yeah, I think we'd all agree. Got a little scared there for a bit when it didn't happen. But here we are. Mark Andrews asks Dan Siegel, thoughts? Tight end, Baltimore.
It's a possibility as much as Juwan Johnson from New Orleans is a possibility. We know Evan Ingram was meeting with Denver today. That's still a possibility, however way you want to look at it. One way or the other, if it's not any of those three guys, then damn it, you better get a tight end in the draft. So have the backup plan to your backup plan to your backup plan, essentially.
Yep. Maybe, says Jay Richer 84. Personally, I hope not. A T. Higgins trade is still in the work. Imagine if this Chargers front office just hoodwinked all of us and they go helter skelter, and all of a sudden here we are, T. Higgins.
That'd shut us up pretty fast, wouldn't it?
Everyone's like, please.
Still got to build the fucking line, but hey, we got T. Higgins.
Everyone's like, please, Joe, shut me up. I love nothing more. Next voicemail, Jake.
Hey guys, this is Matt Waters calling you from Iowa. Big fan of the show. Two things. One, given what Brett Coleman said, do you think that we double dip offensive line in the first two rounds, or do we truly go best player available? And two, in addition to playing the draft chimes for Jake, you've got to play your daughter saying, "Go Chargers," from last year's episode. That was one of the best things ever. Thanks. Great job, guys.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Regular listener to the show, obviously. That was great. I think that the Chargers are still going to operate with that BPA mentality, but they already know what it is that they need, what they need to strengthen. They need to strengthen the trenches. That's obviously been the message of Jim Harbaugh since he's been here. And I've been saying it since we started talking about the draft, that I felt at 22, it was either going to be trenches or tight end. And now obviously things have changed a little bit as we've gotten closer to the draft, because running back has come into that conversation as well. But now with Poona Ford being gone, you have to believe that whether it's the first round or the second round, that they're going to put a high emphasis on adding a little bit more juice to the trenches. So if it was Gray Zabel at 1 and you come around in the second round at 55 and you select one for the defensive line, keep building it up. I don't care, because you need it, and you're going to need it to go against some of these teams.
Well, Jake, we've reached that point in free agency. Haven't even gotten through one day. And Mahul, I'm terrible with names, but let's trade Herbert then, with your logic. Let's trade Justin Herbert. Get him to a contender. This Chargers team doesn't deserve him. What say you? Next question.
This is how far we've fallen.
Yes. Referring to T. Higgins, they're saying that we can't get T. Higgins now because they franchise tags him. They can't sign him as a free agent, but they could easily still acquire him in a trade. I think that's what everybody is referring to. Zay, I agree with Mahul, and I'm following. Damn it. Okay. Wish for your team to trade its best player. Shows me what kind of Chargers fan you are, but that's on you. Harmon or Nolan at 22, Jake?
It's me. It's Derek Harmon. 100% it's Derek Harmon. I had him as my IDL 4 coming into the combine. There were a lot of athletic tests that I didn't see that type of juice on tape, but holy shit. Derek Harmon had himself a hell of a weekend. I love what I see from Derek Harmon. just go back and look at his pass rush win rate for this season in Oregon. It was tremendous. That's the type of presence that you need, especially if you're going to plug him into a guy like Tyler Tart now. Derek Harmon would be awesome on this defensive line.
Carlos Chargers, will George Pickens be available now that DK is with the Steelers? So two-part, I'll add to that. Jake, will he be available, do you think? And would you be interested?
No, I don't think so. And
To
would I
both?
be it's funny because this whole narrative shift of, because people were talking about, Devontae's not going to come because he's a diva, or DK's not going to come here because he's a diva. I might make the argument that George Pickens might be the true diva out of those three. So I don't know. I don't know. But at the same time, more likely, I don't see Pittsburgh being interested in trading him, especially if you believe in the rumors out there for Aaron Rodgers possibly coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, what an offseason for the Steelers if in just a few days of free agency, they go out and they make a huge blockbuster trade for DK Metcalf, and you bring in Aaron Rodgers, and all of a sudden your offense has DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, and Aaron Rodgers. Biggest smile that you're going to find out there is with Aaron Rodgers. That's for damn sure.
Well, and Mike Tomlin. He hasn't had a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers in forever. Stephon Diggs. Jake, what are your thoughts on Stephon Diggs? Not the personality,
Yeah,
but
no,
the talent.
Not trying to judge personality here, but at this point, if you're just going by process of elimination, it has to be on the board, right? Not necessarily to say that I agree or disagree, but can't really put anything past the Chargers right now, given the fact that the wide receiver free agent class is where it is.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we see more Aboigbe, Jake.
I 100% believe that is the plan, because Aboigbe didn't get a chance to play much last year. It was essentially a redshirt year for him, not because of injuries, just because there were better players along the depth chart than he was. And for a fourth round pick, and I have said this, if you go back and you look at the Baltimore Ravens draft of the past 11 years, they have invested in defensive linemen, whether it be edge, whether it be interior defensive linemen, from rounds 1 through 4 for the last 11 years. And I thought that maybe Joe Ortiz was going to do that when he came over to the Chargers. And sure enough, in year 1, he did. So I firmly believe that there is a plan for Aboigbe to have a much bigger handful of snaps this time around.
Jason Greer, $5 donation. How about Zabel at 22, trade up early day 2, grab Omarion Hampton? I don't know if he's going to be available there early day 2.
Even Brett Coleman doesn't even think that he may even last to 22. I mean, I definitely wouldn't hate it. Definitely wouldn't hate it.
If they go Najee
That'd
Harris,
be great.
That's a lesser of a priority or a lesser need to have to go in round 1 or 2. But I wouldn't hate it with or without Najee Harris and J.K. Dobbins, honestly. Athir with a $9.99 donation for questions for Jake. I have a solution. Sign Cooper, trade 2nd and 5th for Waddle, younger and under contract, bring back Everett, move up to get Genty. That's a lot. And draft Taylor round 3. Jake, your thoughts?
Okay.
So
well, first of all, in a world where Jaden Waddle is even available, if you've given up your 2nd and your 5th, you don't have enough ammunition to move up and get Ashton Genty at that point in time. So both of those are done at that point in time. Signing Cooper, I know, is
which one? Cup or
an option. I think I'd probably be more in line with siding with Cup. Cooper probably brings you more of what this offense, how it wants to work, but I'd still probably be in favor of Cup.
According to Zay, Kyle Juszczyk just got released. That'd be fun.
Well, I think we've officially made Scott Matlock an offensive player now.
A lot of money.
Because if Scott Matlock was strictly a defensive player, I'd say, hey, why not go out and get Juszczyk? He's a hell of a player.
Kyle says, why don't people understand that the best teams in the AFC football, Baltimore, Kansas City, Buffalo, don't focus on wide receivers? They have the best lines. I feel like I'm talking crazy pills. Big fan of the show. Okay, so let's go through this for a second. Kansas City, I'm with you. While they've had a Hall of Fame tight end, he was not that way last year. They did spend a first-round pick on Xavier Worthy. They did spend an early one on Rashee Rice. But, like, I guess they haven't spent big money since Tyreek Hill, if that's what we're going at. Buffalo, they had Stephon Diggs, so they kind of did. Baltimore, Baltimore hadn't, really. The closest thing they got to was what? Odell Beckham, and that wasn't overspending. But the context is true. Great teams win from the inside out. And I think you saw in that Houston playoff game, like this Chargers interior offensive line specifically got absolutely mauled and almost got Justin Herbert killed. It wasn't all their fault, but a lot of it was. And we talked about this analogy before of the truck versus trailer. I heard DJ talk about it, players, but I see that as kind of an analogy for the offensive line versus the skill positions. Like if you don't have a good offensive line, the trailer ain't going anywhere. So I know people are frustrated. I get it. It's one day. What about
one day feels like 84 years.
True. 84 years. I don't know who this is. What about the kid they stashed on the practice squad all year? Bash.
Tremont Morris Brash.
Brash. Okay.
Tremont Morris Brash was a favorite of mine out of the undrafted free agency crop that the Chargers brought in last year. I was really hoping that when they had some injuries to their edge room throughout the season that they were going to elevate him, but they never did. And what was his bread and butter at UCF? He was a speed rusher. He was the guy to say, if it's third down, third and long, go get the quarterback. That was what his juice was. So I would love to see him get a bigger role in this defense moving forward. And I think that you will, especially with Joey Bosa now being gone. But at some point in the draft, whether this is round 3 or below, you got to start putting some more depth behind that edge room because you only have Bud Dupree for one more year. You only have Khalil Mack for one more year. And at some point, you're going to need to find your long-term opposite of the line partner with Tuli and build that duo up moving forward.
All caps from Mehul. I'm not going to scream. I'll save your ears.
Thank you. The last time you did that, it really hurt.
I know. You guys say offensive line and defensive line are necessary, but where are those signings?
We're asking the same question as you. There's no disagreement here.
Mm-hmm.
We're asking the same question. Build the floor.
Yeah. Leo says patience, grasshopper. Also all caps. That's what I'm gonna do. Every time there's all caps, I'm gonna use like my elevator voice until the show ends. A couple more voicemails, Jake, before we get out of here. Let's see what this one has to say.
Hey guys, this is Matt Waters calling you from Iowa. Big fan of the show. 2 things. One, given what Brett Coleman said.
Oh, listen to this one. Apologies. Gotta love live shows. Next one.
Hey guys, quick question. Do you think there's a possibility that the Chargers might double pick that nose tackle?
Heard that one too. We're good to go. Look at that.
All right.
Doubled up. Okay, Jake, let's get to rapid fire. We got about 10 minutes left here. So who is left at interior offensive line for us? Jake, who are you looking at?
Probably at Andre James right now as it relates to the center position. That would probably be the top one for me right now.
Yep, Fries, I'd put there.
Yep.
Mekhi Becton, I'd put there.
Becton would be a great option if he comes in. What a change to his career, moving from tackle to guard.
Shaq Mason. All those I would take. They'd all be upgrades, in my opinion. Let's see. And also, like, we were talking about this as if this class in the NFL draft is stacked with the stuff that this Chargers team needs. So, like, I understand it's not happening immediately, but, like, would you rather spend $26 million on your offensive lineman or 4, 3, 6 on a rookie? If he's good, I'd take the latter.
I've always said, I've been saying it for weeks, the defensive line class, interior defensive line class specifically, it's Ed Harris in the abyss type deep. It's extremely deep.
I'm a little Frustrated, says Decor Wiggins as well. But I think we should give Joe a little bit more time to cook. I think he earned a little bit more patience from us from last year. 100% agree. I agree. Matthew, wait, we didn't get a voicemail from you. I apologize. If you did, so sorry. Didn't come in. Unless it was totally a screw up on my part. And if that's the case, I apologize. So, Jake, day 1, close to being in the books. Day 2, 3, 4, and all that stuff coming up. Who would you like?
As far as the next signing goes?
Or signings? Or like who are the ones that you're like, oh, please?
If Najee Harris is truly coming into this team, then you better show me that you're building an offensive line. Now, I'm not going to say that you're not going to prioritize it in the draft because I 100% believe that they will, but you gotta show me a little bit more oomph with that cap space that you got, that you're going to improve this offensive line. Something to shake it up. Because are we really going to run this back with 4/5 of the same offensive line that we did last year? Still don't know what's happening with Trey Pipkins and the fact that he is still on the roster. Is he still going to remain on the roster for the final year of his contract? Who knows? I don't know. But I don't, as we have repeated, you can't look at that Houston Texans playoff game and say to yourself that changes are not warranted. Now, I'm sure that Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh fully realize that. But the guard market today, there were some big signings in the guard market. And especially with the 2 trades that the Bears did before free agency got underway, it kind of drowned the pool very quickly. So there's only a few target names that you could say to yourself, yeah, that guy would be a great asset to this offensive line. That would probably be the next target that I would want to go.
Okay. Yeah, I'm probably with you. Offensive line, or it's probably offensive line, or some kind of pass catcher, tight end or receiver. Johnny Thompson says, no weapons today. The last 24 hours is a net loss. Bozeman was a terrible grade on PFF. Losing Ford hurts. Agreed. Mack, so what? Okay, that's a little bit of a stretch. So what? That's a huge get. Keeping Khalil Mack. Draft getting everybody seems like a reach. Adams was a ticket. Sounds like he was hitching his entire joy on
Devontae Adams.
I was trying to think of what I was trying to say. His entire joy wagon on Devontae Adams, and then my brain farted and didn't do anything.
Good job.
I don't know. Khalil Mack was a big one. Again, they had like 20-something free agents this year. Yeah, they had a lot of money, but they got a ton of roster holes.
Yeah.
So.
After Joey left, you knew that had to be the number one priority to get him back. And there was a lot of interest in Khalil Mack on the free agent market for good reason, considering the fact that he is still productive even at his age. And let's just say, hypothetically, if you did not get Khalil Mack back, that would have shifted your entire free agency and draft approach for what you had to do. That would have changed it all. And who knows, with the deals that were signed today, that any guarantee that you would have been able to go out there and get one of those outside free agents. And then if you didn't, come 22, your priority may have to be at pass rusher, because Jesse Minter loves his pass rushers, and you need someone to go get after the quarterback aside from just Tuli.
Yep. Late breaking news: Chase Young re-signed by the Saints, so mark that one off the board.
Somewhere right now, the director is sobbing. Sobbing. That was his low-end hope, that the Chargers were going to go out and sign Chase Young as a pass rusher. But after things went down with Khalil Mack, I think I didn't expect any of that to happen.
Yeah. They said, where did it go? Chargers signed Daniel Jones. I don't know if he's kidding or not. I think he's kidding. There's no way. Action Dan 65 again with a $20 donation. Man, thank you. Great job with the Locked On Chargers crossover. Thank you. Those guys are amazing. If the Chargers don't address the tight end during free agency, we may need to trade up with the Bucs ahead of the Broncos to draft Loveland. Now, good news. Jake, you and I were talking about this earlier. All these teams signing tight ends, especially the good ones, are one less team that could be going after Loveland or Warren in the draft. So it's kind of a win-win. So the Broncos, they were apparently in talks with Evan Ingram, and I don't think he signed there. But if he did, the Broncos probably wouldn't be going tight end. But you got to get Justin a tight end this year somehow. Whether it's Derwin James, whether it's Evan Ingram.
Yeah, there's no excuse for that. No excuse
to.
whatsoever. You have to get Justin Herbert a long-term option at tight end that he has not had, and more capable tight end that he has not had since the days of Hunter Henry. You have to get him that. So when I was talking to Dan about it earlier today, when that report dropped that Evan Ingram was meeting with the Broncos, kind of looked at it as a double-edged sword, which to say Evan Ingram seems very motivated after getting released from Jacksonville. Denver Broncos obviously need a tight end. It would surely make their offense better, considering what they already have on the outside. You add a middle presence like that. But then I started thinking to myself, well, if signing Evan Ingram means it takes them off the board for Colston Loveland, I'm all in. Sure.
Last question, Jake, before we get out of here. Jason Greer says, what about Tyreek Hill?
He's been so back and forth since the season ended. Oh, I want out of Miami. No, I'm going to stay in Miami. I think he's going to stay in Miami. I don't think that any outside team is going for him.
Jake, you're going to love this. There's a lot of people talking about the draft, talking about tight ends, talking about McMillan overrated, talking about second-round pick options and value. We got a lot of people talking NFL draft. We'll save that for another day. Day one is in the books so far, but we're on the West Coast, so we'll see what happens. Jake, anything else you want to discuss with the great friends before we hop on out of here and cross our fingers for the rest of the night?
You always know that we love this shows. Coming in to banter with you guys and talk to you guys about Chargers football is a lot of fun for us, and we hope that we make it the same for you guys as well. Again, it's day one. We felt that we needed to do a live show today, considering just everything that went down. So if it's you took it as, hey, let's discuss it, let's vent about it, let's yell about it, let's softly talk about it, whatever it is that we needed to do, hopefully we helped give some perspective. If not, then find us later on this week when we'll be back talking about the rest of the fallout from the Chargers free agent period.
Yes. We will be here with you. Pour one out for day one, but there's still time. There's still hope. And there's still lots of free agency left. For Jake, you can find him at Jake D. Hefner. Myself, you can find at DNW Sports. Guys, gals, thank you so much for tuning in. And we'll talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed. Have a good night, everybody.